In the glittering heart of the city, billionaire Daniel Okoro thought he had it all: power, wealth, and respect. But one night, as he dragged his tired body back into his glass-walled penthouse, something unexpected happened. His young maid, Adaise, rushed toward him, pressed her trembling hand over his mouth, and whispered with desperate eyes, "Please, don't make a sound." What could possibly force a servant to silence her powerful boss? Daniel's fury quickly turned into confusion, then fear when the truth was revealed. His only son, little Chidi, was sleepwalking dangerously close to death. A father too busy to notice a child silently crying out for love, and a maid carrying a heartbreaking secret of her own. Their lives would soon collide in ways that money could never control. Before we dive into this emotional journey, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the powerful stories we bring to life every week. The night was suffocating with the weight of luxury. Golden chandeliers had hung above Daniel Okoro for hours, dazzling him with their shine as though mocking his exhaustion. The charity gala had been one of those endless spectacles of wealth where men measured one another not by compassion, but by the number of zeros scribbled on oversized checks. Daniel had worn his best-tailored suit, forced himself to laugh at hollow jokes, and offered a donation so large it silenced the room. Yet beneath the applause and the champagne, he felt only emptiness. By the time his black limousine pulled up to the towering penthouse, his head was heavy, his tie strangling, and all he craved was silence. He tipped his driver without a word and stepped into the marble lobby where the night guard greeted him with nervous respect. The elevator swallowed him whole, carrying him up into the sky, floor after floor, until the city lights melted into dots of fire beneath him. Daniel's penthouse was known among his peers as a palace in the clouds, glass walls stretching toward the heavens, polished marble floors that echoed with every step, and priceless paintings that stared coldly from their frames. But to Daniel, it was nothing more than an expensive prison. Tonight, it should have been quiet. It always was. His staff left by 9, the silence of the night, his only companion. He placed his hand on the door's side and pushed it open. And then it happened. A hand clamped across his mouth, strong despite its trembling. His body stiffened instantly, instincts sharpened by years of boardroom battles. He was about to swing his fist when a voice hissed urgently in his ear. "Please, don't make a sound." It was a woman's voice, soft, quivering, yet commanding. His pulse thundered in his ears. Who dared enter his home, his sanctuary? With a sharp twist, Daniel turned, ready to confront an intruder. But his eyes froze when he saw her. "Adaise," he whispered, fury and shock lacing his voice. The maid. The new one. Barely 3 weeks since she had been hired. A quiet young woman in her mid-20s with skin like polished ebony and eyes that rarely lifted from the ground. She had seemed invisible, dutiful, cautious, almost forgettable. And yet here she was, standing inches from him, her hand still trembling from where it had covered his mouth. "What on earth do you think you're doing in my house at this hour?" Daniel growled, tugging his tie loose with irritation. Adaise's eyes glistened with something between fear and courage. Her lips quivered, but her voice carried an urgency that forced him to listen. "Sir, I beg you, don't raise your voice. Please." "Why shouldn't I?" he shot back, his voice low but sharp. Adaise swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling quickly. Then she spoke the words that cracked the silence of that glittering penthouse into pieces. "Because your son is sleepwalking. And if you wake him the wrong way, you could lose him." Daniel froze as if struck by lightning. His son, his little boy Chidi. The thought was absurd. He shook his head, convinced he had misheard. "My son," he whispered, disbelief dripping from every syllable. "Yes," Adaise answered, her voice trembling but firm. "He has been walking in his sleep every night around this time. Tonight he nearly reached the stairs. I stopped him. If I hadn't, he might not have survived." The words hit Daniel like a hammer. He staggered back, gripping the edge of a glass table to steady himself. His 7-year-old son, his only child, the one he had sworn to protect after his wife's untimely death, had been drifting like a ghost through the night while he buried himself in endless meetings and galas. How long has this been happening?" he demanded, his voice breaking in places he didn't expect. Adaise lowered her gaze. "Since I arrived, sir. Almost every night. 7 times now." Daniel's jaw clenched. A storm of guilt raged inside him. How had he not noticed he was the boy's father? And yet it was this young maid, paid a fraction of what he spent on a single dinner, who had been watching over Chidi while he slept in ignorance. "You should have told me," Daniel's voice cracked, half anger, half despair. Adaise flinched, but stood her ground. "I didn't think it mattered to you." Those words pierced deeper than any insult he had ever faced. For a man who commanded boardrooms, signed billion-dollar deals, and bent governments to his will, the truth was unbearable. His own child might believe he did not care. "I do care," Daniel whispered hoarsely. Adai's eyes softened, but she shook her head gently. "Children don't feel belief, sir. They feel your presence." Her words cut him open, raw and undeniable. For a moment the room seemed to shrink, the silence deafening. And then a sound. Soft, slow footsteps echoed down the hallway. Both turned sharply. A small figure appeared, bathed in the dim light of the corridor. Barefoot eyes, half-closed lips moving soundlessly. "Daddy," the boy murmured, his voice thin as air. Daniel's heart nearly burst. His son. His little Chidi. Fragile, lost, walking blindly toward danger. "Walk slowly," Adeze whispered urgently. "Don't startle him." Daniel dropped to his knees, arms wide open. His voice trembled as he called softly. "Come here, son. I'm right here." The boy stumbled forward, eyes unseeing, yet his tiny body moved straight into Daniel's arms. Daniel clutched him, pressing his cheek against the child's soft hair, his heart pounding as if it might tear through his chest. "I was looking for you," Chidi whispered in his half-dream. Daniel's throat tightened. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes. "I'm here now, son. I'm here." And for the first time in years, he meant it. He held his son close, feeling the small heartbeat against his own chest. In that fragile embrace, surrounded by silent marble and glass, Daniel realized the truth. All his wealth, all his victories, meant nothing if he could not protect this little boy. Adaiz stood back, her hands clasped in front of her apron, her eyes glistening with unspoken memories. She did not interrupt. She only watched, a quiet guardian in the night, carrying secrets Daniel had yet to uncover. Daniel looked at her over his son's head, his voice breaking. "Why did you cover my mouth tonight?" Her lips trembled before she answered. "Because I've seen death come from careless noise, and I could not let it come for him." The weight of her words settled heavily. For the first time, Daniel saw her not as a servant but as a woman carrying a past she refused to name. In that moment, the billionaire felt powerless. And yet in holding his son close, he felt richer than he ever had. The night stretched on, filled not with silence but with something far more fragile and real. The story of Daniel, his son, and the maid who dared to silence him had only just begun. The penthouse was cloaked in a heavy silence after Daniel carried Chidi back into his room. The boy's small body, still trembling from the trance of sleepwalking, was tucked carefully under the soft blue blanket. Daniel lingered longer than usual, brushing his son's hair back from his forehead, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. For years he had rushed through these moments, if he was even present at all. Tonight the seconds stretched into something sacred. When he finally stepped out of the room, Adaiz was waiting in the hallway. She stood with her hands folded neatly in front of her head, bowed as though she had crossed an invisible line. Her black uniform seemed far too plain for the magnitude of what she had just done. Daniel looked at her with a mixture of gratitude, shame, and suspicion. "How long have you been guiding him like this?" he asked, his voice low, almost afraid of the answer. "Every night, sir," she said softly. "Since the first week I came here, it always happens after midnight." He rises, his eyes open but empty, and he wanders as if searching for something. Daniel's stomach twisted. "And no one told me." Adaiza hesitated. "The other staff don't stay late enough to see it. I couldn't leave him like that. So I stayed, unpaid, unnoticed." Her words pierced him deeper than she knew. He was the father, yet he had left his child's safety to chance. Meanwhile, this young woman, a stranger in his home, had quietly assumed a responsibility that should never have been hers. "You should have come to me immediately," Daniel muttered, his pride flaring despite the guilt eating him alive. Adaiz lifted her gaze for the first time, her eyes dark pools, shimmering with quiet strength. "Would you have listened?" The question struck him harder than any accusation. He opened his mouth but no words came. She was right. He had built walls around himself, walls of money and schedules and excuses. Listening to his son, or anyone for that matter, had never been his priority. For the first time in his career-driven life, Daniel Okoro found himself speechless. He sank heavily onto the leather bench by the hallway, loosening his tie as though it were strangling him. "Tell me everything," he said finally. Adaiz hesitated, then spoke in a voice threaded with sorrow. "Sleepwalking is dangerous, sir. Children don't know where their steps will take them. Tonight, he was inches from the stairs. A single misstep, and..." She swallowed hard, as though reliving a memory too painful to voice. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. The image of his son's small body tumbling down the marble staircase seared itself into his mind. "Why didn't you wake me?" His voice cracked, ragged with guilt. Her reply was steady, but her eyes glistened. "Because you were never here, sir." The truth stung like a lash. He wanted to defend himself, wanted to say he worked for Chidi's future, that the empire he built was for his son's security, but deep down he knew it was a lie. The truth was simpler: he had been absent. Adeze, seeing his silence, shifted uncomfortably. Her hands twisted the edge of her apron. "When I was a child," she said softly, "my mother worked nights too. Long hours, sometimes 2 jobs. I would sit by the door waiting for her voice. That waiting, it's heavier than hunger. I think your son is waiting too." Her confession hung in the air like incense, sweet, painful, unshakable. Daniel lifted his gaze to her, studying the quiet strength etched into her young face. For the first time he noticed how her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived through losses he couldn't yet comprehend. He exhaled shakily. "I never wanted him to wait for me. I thought, if I gave him everything, he would never lack." Adeze shook her head gently. "Children don't need everything, sir. They only need someone." Her words carved themselves into his chest deeper than any insult from his rivals ever had. At that moment, a faint sound drifted from Chidi's room, a soft sigh, the creak of bedsheets as he shifted in sleep. Both Daniel and Adeze turned instinctively alert, protective. Daniel stood, his voice quieter now. "Stay, please, at least until morning." Adeze blinked, startled by the sudden plea. "Sir, that isn't necessary. I've done my part." "It is necessary," Daniel interrupted. His tone was firm, but beneath it trembled something raw, something unfamiliar even to him: vulnerability. "I can't face this night alone. Not after what I saw." For the first time, Adeze saw the billionaire stripped of arrogance. And for the first time, Daniel saw his maid not as a servant, but as the protector his son had desperately needed. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken truths. Finally, Adeze nodded. "Very well, sir. I'll stay." Daniel managed a faint, weary smile, one that held more gratitude than words could express. They moved into the living room together. The city outside pulsed with neon life, but within the glass walls, the penthouse felt like a fragile bubble of humanity. Adeze slipped into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of warm ginger tea, placing one gently before him. "You'll need this," she said. Daniel accepted the cup, his hand brushing hers for the briefest second. He felt a strange current of humility run through him. For years, he had been served drinks by staff without so much as a glance. Tonight, this simple gesture carried the weight of salvation. They sat in silence for a while, sipping the tea. For Daniel, it was a silence unlike any he had known, not empty, not cold, but grounding. He found himself watching her, wondering what kind of childhood bred such quiet resilience. What scars she carried that made her so vigilant. And then, as though sensing his thoughts, Adeze whispered, "Sleepwalking took someone from me once, my little brother. He was only 8. He wandered one night, and I was too young to stop him. He fell. I never forgot the sound. That's why I couldn't let your boy walk alone." Daniel's chest constricted. He set his cup down, staring at her with wide, stricken eyes. This was more than duty. This was redemption for her. She had been fighting ghosts long before she stepped into his home. "Why carry that alone?" he asked softly. Adeze's lips trembled, but she forced a small smile. "Because I learned early that some wounds don't heal by sharing. They heal by protecting others from the same fate." Daniel leaned back, shaken. The billionaire who had believed money solved every problem now sat face to face with a woman who carried no riches but bore more strength than he ever had. The clock chimed softly in the background. Midnight had long passed, yet Daniel felt as though the night had just begun. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking of contracts or profits. He was thinking of his son's small heartbeat, his maid's unspoken scars, and the life he had been too blind to see. And though he didn't know it yet, this night was the beginning of his transformation, not just as a man of wealth, but as a father who would learn the price of presence. The city outside roared with life, but in the fragile silence of his penthouse, Daniel Okoro vowed one thing: he would not let his son wander alone ever again. The sun rose slowly over the city, spilling gold across the skyline. For years, Daniel Okoro had greeted mornings with a tight schedule: meetings penciled in at dawn, phone calls waiting before his eyes even opened. But this morning felt different. For the first time in months, he had not left his penthouse before daylight. He sat at the edge of his son's bed, watching Chidi stir awake, his small lashes fluttering against his cheeks. "Daddy," the boy whispered, his voice hoarse with sleep. Daniel's heart clenched. It was such a simple word, one he had heard countless times before, yet it had never struck him so deeply. He smiled softly. "I'm here, son." Chidi blinked up at him, confusion clouding his young face. "You didn't travel?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "Not today. Not tomorrow. I'm staying." The boy's eyes widened with cautious hope. For so long, his father had been nothing more than a fleeting presence, photos on the wall, gifts delivered by assistants, phone calls that always ended too quickly. Yet here he was, sitting beside him at dawn, promising something Chidi had almost stopped believing in. Daniel tucked the blanket around his son's small body and whispered, "I'll be here when you wake and when you sleep, I promise." The boy reached up, tiny fingers clutching his father's hand. That small gesture sent a surge of warmth through Daniel, more powerful than any business victory he had ever claimed. When they walked into the dining room, Adieze was already there, laying out breakfast, pancakes, bananas, sliced neatly on top, and a sprinkle of cinnamon that filled the room with sweetness. Daniel sat at the table with his son, a sight that startled even the house staff. "Do you like them?" Daniel asked, watching Chidi chew eagerly. The boy nodded, his cheeks stuffed. "Banana with cinnamon," he mumbled happily. Daniel's gaze shifted to Adieze, who was wiping the counter. She glanced at him briefly, the faintest smile playing on her lips before she lowered her eyes again. It wasn't the smile of a servant pleased to serve. It was the smile of someone who cared quietly without expectation. As Chidi ate, Daniel found himself studying the room differently. He had always viewed his penthouse as a fortress of wealth, but now it felt fragile, alive with the laughter of his son. He realized how much of that laughter he had missed. After breakfast, Daniel insisted on helping Chidi dress for school. At first, his hands fumbled with the buttons, and he tied the shoelaces clumsily. But Chidi giggled, his laughter bubbling like music. Daniel felt embarrassment wash over him, but also joy. For once, he wasn't perfect. He wasn't polished. He was simply a father learning. When the driver arrived, Daniel walked his son downstairs himself. Neighbors stared in disbelief. Daniel Okoro, the billionaire, holding his child's hand all the way to the car. For years, he had hidden behind chauffeurs and assistants, too busy to be seen doing such ordinary tasks. Today, he didn't care. Chidi looked up at him with sparkling eyes. "Daddy, you're coming back right." Daniel crouched down, pressing a kiss to his son's forehead. "Yes, son. I'll be here when you return." The boy grinned before climbing into the car, and Daniel stood at the curb until the vehicle disappeared from view. Only then did he turn back toward the building, his heart heavy with both resolve and regret. Back upstairs, Adiz was folding laundry with quiet efficiency. Daniel hesitated at the doorway, watching her. For years, he had overlooked the lives of those who worked for him, reducing them to nameless figures in uniforms. But now he wanted to know. He needed to know. "Adiz," he began, his voice softer than usual. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir." "Why did you never ask for more? More pay, more recognition. You've done more for my son than I have in months." Her hands paused on the fabric, her eyes lowering again. "Because I didn't do it for thanks or money. I did it because I couldn't watch another child suffer the way my brother did." Daniel's breath caught. The memory she had confessed the night before her brother's tragic death suddenly painted her every action in a sharper light. She had been carrying grief, and yet she had transformed it into protection for his son. "I don't deserve your loyalty," Daniel said, guilt thick in his voice. Adiz met his gaze, this time steady and unflinching. "Your son does, and that's enough." The simplicity of her words struck him harder than any corporate betrayal he had ever endured. That afternoon, Daniel shocked his secretary by canceling 2 major meetings. For years, he had placed contracts above family deadlines, above dinners. Today, he opened his laptop at the dining table, the same table where his son usually sat for homework. The silence of the penthouse felt different now, not empty, but expectant. When Chidi returned from school and saw his father still there, his small body froze in the doorway. "Daddy, you didn't travel?" he asked, voice trembling with disbelief. "No," Daniel said, smiling. "I stayed." Chidi ran into his arms, hugging him so tightly, Daniel thought his heart might break. For the first time in years, he felt a bond stitching itself back together, fragile but real. In the corner, Adiz watched quietly, her heart swelling with relief, though her face remained guarded. She knew promises were easy to make but harder to keep. Yet in this moment, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. That evening, Daniel attempted something he hadn't done since his wife's death bedtime stories. He stumbled through the words, his voice cracking, but Chidi's delighted giggles filled the room. When the boy finally fell asleep clutching his toy car, Daniel lingered at his bedside, his chest heavy with both love and guilt. As he stepped into the hallway, Adiz was waiting. She handed him a blanket, her voice soft. He'll sleep better if you tuck this over him. Daniel accepted it, his eyes meeting hers with something unspoken. Gratitude, respect, maybe even something deeper he dared not name. For the first time in his life, Daniel Okoro, the man who had conquered markets and crushed rivals, felt humbled not by power, but by love. And as he stood in that dim hallway watching Adeze disappear into the shadows, he realized his greatest challenge had only begun to prove to his son and to himself that he could be more than a wealthy man. He could be a present father. Morning did not so much arrive as it seeped in thin silver light crawling across the glass and steel, pushing last night's vows into the naked space of day. Daniel brewed coffee himself, the action clumsy and almost comic, while Adeze moved like a quiet metronome through the kitchen. Chidi rubbed his eyes at the table, a small prince with pancake syrup on his chin, blissfully unaware that the empire outside had begun to wobble because his father had chosen to stay. Daniel's phone pulsed on the counter. He ignored it until the third vibration felt like a dare. He swiped the screen. A wall of messages. Victor Board Chair U. Argent. Where are you, PR? Rumors trending. General Counsel Media, sniffing around charity deal. EA Linda reporters asking why you missed 7 a.m. investment call. He looked up. Adieze's was drying a cup, gaze lowered. You can take your calls, sir, she said softly. I can also finish breakfast with my son, he replied, surprised by the firmness in his voice. Chidi beamed as though that sentence was the sweetest thing on the table. When the driver arrived, Daniel walked Chidi down, knelt in front of the shiny school car door, and smoothed the collar that he had finally learned to button without fumbling. I'll be here when you come back, he said. Pattern, not promise, Chidi whispered with solemn importance, then giggled. That's what Miss Ada says. He hugged Daniel hard. The door shut. The car slid away. Back upstairs, Daniel faced his world. He dialed Victor. Daniel. Victor barked without preamble. You vanished from the call. Investors are angry. The Eastland deal is wobbling. We cannot afford you playing house. Daniel went very still. I was with my son. Hire a better nanny, Victor snapped. That's what money is for. The words landed like a slap. Daniel stared at the city, the crisscrossing highways shimmering in the heat. Money is for many things, he said evenly, but not for replacing a father. He heard Victor's sharp exhale of disbelief. Sentiment is expensive, Victor said. We'll reconvene at noon. Be present or be prepared for the board to support you by appointing interim oversight. The call ended. Daniel exhaled through his nose and found Adeze at the threshold, as if she had waited just beyond the invisible line she never crossed. Will you go? She asked. I'll be here, he said, then caught himself. I will handle it from home. A shadow crossed her features, approval, tangled with worry. Then start with patterns. If you must take calls, take them here where he sees you when he returns. He nodded. Patterns, he repeated, letting the word root inside him. An hour later, PR rang. Emma's voice was cool and quick. We have chatter. Paparazzi snapped you walking your son to the car. Normally sweet, but 2 angles are trending. Billionaire neglects, boardroom for bedtime. And, she hesitated, mystery young maid spending nights in penthouse. Daniel's jaw tightened. She saved my son, he said. Write it exactly like that. We can't put a domestic worker at the center of your narrative without context, Emma said carefully. People will twist it. We need a clean line philanthropist, father chooses family. I will not erase her, Daniel said. The steel in his voice surprised even him. Draft what you must, but do not demean her. When he hung up, Adeze was at the sink, shoulders rigid. I don't need my name in anything, she said without turning. I only need him safe. Daniel stepped closer, not too close. You're not a scandal, Adeze. You're the reason I noticed my own child. She set the sponge down, finally facing him. There was a shine to her eyes that wasn't quite tears. It was gratitude mixed with terror. Thank you, she whispered. Then almost instantly she drew herself in again, as if kindness was a luxury she had learned to ration. The intercom buzzed. The day guard's voice crackled. Sir, there are reporters downstairs. Daniel sighed. We'll use the service elevator, he said, then realized they had nowhere to go. There was no safe out that did not lead directly into a lens. He shook his head. No, we are not hiding in our own home. He spent the late morning at the dining table, laptops and documents spread beside a bowl of crayons, of which one single blue stick, Chidi's favorite, had been worn down to a nub. Between calls, Daniel booked a pediatric appointment with a sleep specialist and texted the school counselor to flag any daytime drowsiness. Each small act felt like a brick laid where once there had been air. At noon, Victor called again, this time with 3 other board members on speaker. The conversation unfurled like a familiar negotiation until Victor's tone shifted from business to blade. There is also the matter of the maid, Victor said. Optics, Daniel. The girl is young. The internet is cruel. You understand. Daniel's hand tightened around his pen. Her name is Adiz. And optics do not outrank gratitude. A beat of silence. One director cleared his throat. We're not asking you to be ungrateful, he said. We're asking you to be wise. Daniel stared at the blank space Chidi usually used for tracing letters. How many times had he chosen wise when what he really meant was cold? Not today. Wisdom starts at home, he said, and ended the call. He found Adiz dusting the frames along the hallway photos he rarely looked at. His fingers hovered over one of himself at a ribbon-cutting smile, perfect and eyes empty. Beside it, a smaller frame, him and Chidi at a beach 3 summers ago. They were both laughing at something out of frame. He forgot what it was, and the forgetting hurt. Miss Ada, he began and stopped. The old sir and miss felt too small for what lived between them now, an unasked-for alliance. She turned curious. I booked a specialist, he said. We'll go this week. And a home assessment to make the stairs safer tonight. Her relief broke through like light. Thank you, she said, and then because she could not help herself, patterns. He smiled despite the storm outside. Patterns, he agreed. The doorbell chimed. Not the intercom up close at the threshold. Daniel's shoulders lifted instinctively. He opened the door to find a woman in a crisp navy suit, holding a leather folder, a taut smile pinned to her face. Behind her, a camera lens glinted and withdrew. Mr. Okoro, she said, extending a card. I'm from City Child Wellness Advocacy. We received an anonymous tip about possible nighttime hazards for your son. This is routine. She softened her voice. We can schedule a home visit. Daniel's pulse spiked, shame rising like heat. Anonymous tip. He didn't need a map to know where anonymous often began. Boardrooms, rivals, anyone who profited from his stumble. He stepped back, letting her into the foyer. We'll cooperate fully, he said, measured. But know this, the hazard was me not being here. I am here now. The advocate glanced at Adaze. And you are? I'm the maid, Adaez said quietly. I found him the first night. I've been staying late to guide him back to bed. The advocate's eyes warmed. She took notes, scheduled the visit for the next day, and left with a nod that was almost conspiratorial. Fathers who learn fast make my job easy, she murmured at the door. The silence that followed was dense, then soft. Adaze exhaled. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. I'm sorry, he said. I should have been here sooner. Then be here now, she replied, gentler than any absolution, and returned to her quiet orbit of the house. Afternoon crept in. Daniel's laptop pinged with a steady cruelty, but his gaze kept snagging on the small things, the toy car under the couch, the pencil shaving curled like a tiny cinnamon ribbon, the blue crayon flattened from love. He moved through his home making calls and also making amends. He installed temporary child gates, ordered sensors for doors, removed the fragile sculpture from beside the stairwell that suddenly looked like a blade waiting for a fall. Near dusk, a florist arrived with an ostentatious bouquet in a cream envelope edged in gold. Daniel assumed another hollow thanks from the charity gala until he recognized the handwriting on the card inside, elegant, exacting. Mother-in-law. He had not seen her in months. Grief had turned their conversations brittle. Your son's bedtime should not make headlines, the note read. If you need help, ask family, not the internet. I will come tomorrow. A postscript in smaller script, I miss my daughter daily. Don't make her absence heavier than it is. Daniel's throat tightened. He pictured his late wife, her laughter, her way of smoothing storms before they spilled. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket like a small stone he could carry. When Chidi's car finally pulled up, Daniel was already at the door. The boy barreled into his arms with the single-minded devotion of children who forgive easily because they need to. Did you draw? Daniel asked, crouching to Chidi's height. Chidi grinned, pulling out a crumpled paper. Blue lines slashed and looped across the page, a house with enormous windows, a stick figure with spiky hair, a short one with a round head. Between them, a taller figure with long hair, triangle dress, holding both their hands. Daniel's breath hitched. Who's that in the middle? An angel, Chidi said matter-of-factly. She comes when you're both too busy. Daniel met Adiz's eyes over his son's head. Neither of them spoke. The evening gathered around them like a prayer. Kalechi's grip tightened. I know, I don't deserve you. But please, Amara, let us start again. I will do anything, work by your side, prove my worth. Just give me one chance. You should rest, she said. I'll check him at midnight. I'll check him, Daniel replied. We'll check him, Patterns. A small, unguarded smile curved her mouth. Patterns, she echoed. They were almost at the living room when the doorbell rang again, insistent, sharp, urgent. Daniel frowned. He glanced at the monitor and felt the air thin in his lungs. The screen showed Victor and behind him, two board members in dark suits, expressions carved from stone, a photographer pretending to tie his shoe at the end of the hall. Adesa's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you want me to go? No, Daniel said, straightening shoulders, squaring around a new spine he had built over 2 days of love and terror. Stay. This is our house. He reached for the handle, the weight of the evening settling into his palm like a verdict. He opened the door. Daniel, Victor said, stepping forward. We need to talk now. Daniel took a breath that felt like a line drawn with ink that would not fade. Then we talk here, he said, voice calm and unmovable. Where my son sleeps. Where I finally learned what matters. Victor's polished shoes clicked against the marble as he strode into the penthouse, two board members flanking him like shadows. Their suits were impeccable, their smiles sharp, but their eyes carried judgment that weighed heavier than their leather briefcases. Daniel closed the door slowly behind them, each click of the lock echoing like a drumbeat. I didn't invite you in, Daniel said coolly, though his pulse thudded in his throat. Victor smirked. Daniel, when the empire shakes, the board doesn't wait for invitations. We come to steady it. This is my home, not the boardroom, Daniel replied, steady but low, glancing toward the hallway where Chidi slept. Victor's eyes swept the penthouse, pausing deliberately on Ada's, who stood with her hands folded by the kitchen counter. His smirk deepened. Ah, the infamous Maid, the one journalists whisper about. He turned back to Daniel. Your judgment slips, my friend. A man in your position cannot afford sentimental entanglements. Adesa's cheeks flushed, but her gaze remained steady, unflinching under the weight of their scorn. Daniel's jaw tightened. Show her respect, he warned. She saved my son. Is that the story you'll sell to shareholders? One of the board members interjected, voice smooth and oily, that your billions rest on the wisdom of a servant girl? The insult sliced the air like a blade. Daniel's chest burned with the urge to lash out, but Adesi placed a quiet hand on the counter, her expression unreadable. It was as though she had endured far worse in silence and would not flinch now. Victor circled slowly, studying Daniel, like a hunter circling wounded prey. We built this empire together, he said, his voice lowering to something almost intimate. You've been the golden boy, Daniel. The visionary, but vision requires focus. While you sit here playing father, competitors sharpen their knives, investors are restless. And he gestured broadly to the penthouse, to Adese, you are distracted. Daniel forced a steady breath. My son is not a distraction. He is my reason. The board members exchanged quick glances, eyebrows raised. Victor laughed humorlessly. Listen to yourself. You sound like a school teacher, not a titan of industry. And maybe that's what I should have sounded like all along, Daniel shot back. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. Victor leaned closer, his cologne sharp and suffocating. You're forgetting yourself, Daniel. Empires are not built on bedtime stories. No, Daniel said firmly, his eyes narrowing. But they crumble when their kings abandon their heirs. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, power clashing wordlessly between them. Finally, Victor straightened, turning to the others with a dismissive wave. Document his words. The board will decide if our beloved Daniel still fits the throne he built. Daniel's stomach nodded, but he didn't waver. Do what you must. But know this, if my son ever wonders where his father was, the answer will not be at a meeting. The board members gathered their things, clearly unsettled by his defiance. As they moved to leave, Victor lingered. His eyes flicked once more toward Ada's, a smirk curling his lips. Careful, Daniel. Sometimes the greatest threats don't come from rivals, but from within your own walls. The door closed behind them, and the penthouse exhaled. Daniel leaned against the frame, tension draining from his body. His chest heaved as though he had fought a war. Ada stepped closer, her voice low. You risked everything for me. Daniel shook his head. No, for him, for Chidi. But you, he hesitated, searching for the words. You opened my eyes to see what matters. I can't let them twist that into shame. Her eyes softened, and for the first time Daniel saw not just strength, but vulnerability shimmering there. They will come for you harder now, she warned. Let them, Daniel said. I've fought men with more power than them. But I've never fought for something that mattered as much as this. That night, Daniel stayed awake long after the city had dimmed. He sat at Chidi's bedside, watching the boy breathe, his small hand curled around the stub of a blue crayon. In the quiet memories haunted him nights he had missed birthdays, mornings when he had left before dawn. His late wife's voice lingered in the corners of the room, reminding him of promises broken, time wasted. Adeza entered softly, carrying a blanket. She paused when she saw him there, her expression unreadable. "You should rest," she murmured. "I can't," Daniel admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see what could have happened if you hadn't stopped him that night." Adeza placed the blanket gently over Chidi, her fingers brushing the boy's curls with tenderness. "He's safe now. But safety is more than one night, sir. It is presence, routine, love." Daniel looked up at her, his chest tightening. "Teach me, please. Show me how to be the father he needs." The request stunned her. For a moment she looked as though she might refuse. But then she nodded slowly, the weight of her own past flickering in her eyes. "Start small. Dinner at the table. Reading together. Holding his hand when he walks. Children don't need grand gestures, they need patterns." Daniel exhaled the word like a promise. Patterns. The next evening he canceled yet another meeting. He cooked badly, burning the rice and oversalting the stew, but Chidi laughed until his belly shook and Adiz quietly corrected the seasoning when Daniel wasn't looking. They sat together at the table, crumbs and juice stains, marking the beginning of something real. Later, as Daniel tucked Chidi into bed, the boy whispered, "Daddy, will you still be here when I wake up?" Daniel kissed his forehead, holding him close. "Yes, son, always." Adieze stood quietly in the doorway, her silhouette softened by the hallway light. She watched them, her heart full, yet guarded, as though she feared the fragile peace might shatter. But as Daniel held his son, he felt something he hadn't in years. Not the hollow pride of wealth, not the fleeting thrill of conquest, but the enduring strength of love. For the first time in his life, Daniel Okoro knew what it meant to be rich. And somewhere in the quiet shadows, Adeze knew her brother's memory was finally finding redemption. Morning arrived with the soft clatter of porcelain and the low hum of a kettle. Daniel woke before the alarm, not to chase a flight or a market opening, but to beat the sunrise to his son's door. He stood in the doorway a moment, watching Chidi sleep, curled around the worn blue crayon like a talisman. It struck him that every castle needed a small, stubborn color to keep it human. He brewed coffee this time without scorching the pot, and whisked eggs with an attention he used to reserve for term sheets. Adaze moved around him, quiet and efficient, the easy choreography of two people learning each other's steps. Occasionally their hands reached for the same utensil. Each time one of them paused and let the other pass. Small courtesies, Daniel thought. Bricks in a bridge. Chidi patted in with a yawn, hair leaning in all directions, socks mismatched. "Smells happy," he announced. Daniel laughed. "That's cinnamon. And maybe a little smoke." They ate together. Chidi told a long, meandering story about a classmate who claimed a tooth fairy double-parked outside the school. Daniel listened, really listened, without checking his phone, without rushing the punchlines. When it was time to go, he knelt to tie shoelaces. He still fumbled the loops, but Chidi's giggles patched the clumsy into endearing. On the way out, the elevator doors slid open to reveal camera flashes like lightning. The concierge stepped between them, flustered. "Sir, I tried." "It's fine," Daniel said calmly, lowering his face to Chidi's. "Look at me, not the lights." Chidi focused on his father's eyes, small hands gripping Daniel's fingers. They walked through the noise like a private parade, past questions flung like stones. "Is the maid living with you? Are you unfit to lead? Is your son safe?" Daniel kept his gaze steady, every step a refusal to turn love into spectacle. Back upstairs, he found Adayez standing by the window, eyes narrowed at the swarm below. "They won't stop soon," she said. "No," he agreed. "But we will not build a life around their noise." At 9, the pediatric sleep specialist, Dr. Salako, arrived with a nurse and a calm that seemed to lower the volume of the whole penthouse. She examined the stairwell, the door latches, the balcony locks. She asked gentle questions about routines, family history, stress. When she spoke to Daniel, she chose words without blame. When she spoke to Adeza, she used the same professional respect, as if the title Maid erased none of her value as an observer. "Sleepwalking can correlate with stress and inconsistent bedtimes," Dr. Salako said, reviewing notes. "We'll run a sleep study this week. For now, predictable evenings, low sugar after dinner, no screens an hour before bed. If he rises, guide him, don't jolt him awake." "Patterns," Daniel murmured. The doctor smiled. "Yes, Mr. Okoro. Patterns are stories the body learns to trust." As they walked the team out, a second elevator chimed. Daniel's mother-in-law, Ngozi, stepped into the foyer in a navy wrapper and fierce sunglasses, the kind of woman who carried weather in her wake. She removed the shades, assessing Daniel with a wide sweep that somehow took in his heartbeat. "You look tired," she said. "Good. Tired means you were here." He swallowed. "Mama Ngozi." She turned to Adaze. "You are the one who saw. Thank you." The words were simple, but her tone was a benediction. Adaze ducked her head. Daniel recognized the way she folded gratitude small, like something to be rationed. Ngozi did not waste minutes. She toured the apartment like an inspector general testing locks, rejecting the decorative ladder shelf near the window. Useless and dangerous out ordering furniture, reconfigured, so lines of sight to the hallway remained clear. When she paused at the beach photo, her face softened and sharpened at once. "My daughter loved this boy more than breath," she said. "When she died, we all began pretending objects could hold him. Only arms can do that." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I know," he whispered. "I am trying." Ngozi regarded him a long moment, then nodded. "Trying is good. Consistency is better. Children count days, not declarations. Let him count you." After she left with promises to return with Jolov and a sharper eye, Daniel opened his laptop at the dining table and called his secretary. "Reschedule the Beijing briefing to Friday," he said. "Move any 12-person call into 3-person calls. No meetings between 6 and 9 p.m. Put a wall there and name it Chidi." "Sir," the secretary stammered. "You heard me," Daniel said. "Also, authorize hazard-proofing expenses without cap, and send a respectful note to PR. We do not erase staff to make me look heroic." He ended the call to find Adaze near the doorway, an unreadable expression hovering at the edge of her mouth. Admiration, worry, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "He will remember this," she said. "The way the house starts to breathe differently." The day passed in small repairs. A child gate snapped into place with a satisfying click. A door chime pinged gently when opened. Daniel rotated the oversized sculpture to a corner, where its angles looked like art again instead of threat. Adaze laundered the plush animals. Chidi, one by one, tested his pillows each night. By late afternoon, the sky bruised violet. Chidi bounded in from school chatter, spilling out of him like marbles. He drew hands smudged blue and green and explained with grave seriousness that superheroes needed naps too. Daniel suggested a new rule: family reading at 7, lights at 8. Chidi agreed on one condition, that the story include a dragon. "I can negotiate dragons," Daniel said solemnly, and Adaze bit back a smile. Dinner was Ngozi's jollof, delivered warm and bossy. Daniel set the table himself carefully, placing the blue crayon beside Chidi's plate for morale. They ate, they laughed. After dishes, they built a blanket fort. Daniel crawled in last, bumping his head and cursing softly, before remembering to censor himself. Inside the small Twilight kingdom, Chidi declared himself Mayor Adaze, the security chief, and Daniel the library. "Because you hold stories," Chidi explained, patting his father's chest. The words struck like an oath. At 7, they read. Daniel stumbled over a page with too many dragon adjectives. Chidi corrected him with delighted ferocity. Adaze listened from the doorway, then hummed a lullaby so hushed it seemed the room leaned in to catch it. The melody was simple, rooted in a place Daniel had never been but could suddenly taste smoke and harmattan dust, and a courtyard where women's hands kept time against baskets. He felt something inside his chest unclench. Lights out at 8. Chidi resisted with the theatrical stamina of 7-year-olds, then surrendered, blue crayon clutched breath, rowing slowly into sleep. Daniel and Adaze conferred in whispers in the hall, agreeing to alternate checks 10, 12, 2. At 1007, Chidi slept starfished across the bed. At 1201, his eyelids fluttered, his body shifting upright with eerie determination. Daniel's pulse spiked. He stepped in, voice low and steady. "We're going back to bed, Captain." Chidi turned his face vaguely toward the sound. Daniel guided him the way he'd been taught, no jolt, no scare. The boy lay down. His breathing deepened. Daniel exhaled the shaky breath he'd been holding. At 140, Daniel and Adaze sat on the couch, a quiet truce with the night. He found himself asking about the lullaby. She told him its name in Igbo, then translated, "Come sleep, child, the road is long and the night is gentle." He repeated the phrase, clumsy but sincere. She corrected his vowels once, then shook her head with a smile. Close enough to mean it. The buzzer cut through the hush. A single surgical ring from the lobby at 1:43 a.m. Daniel frowned, checked the monitor. A delivery rider in a rain jacket stood under the camera's fisheye. The doorman rang through. "Mr. Okoro, a package. No sender." "Send him up," Daniel said before thinking. The doorman hesitated. "It's past 1. Daniel glanced toward Chidi's door, toward the sleeping city, banded in neon. "I'll meet him at the elevator." The doors opened with a soft sigh. The rider handed over a slim envelope and a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. No signature required, no name. The elevator closed before Daniel could ask a single useful question. He looked at Adiese. She shook her head wary. He slit the envelope. Inside a single photo, grainy telephoto taken through glass at night. It showed Adiese's hand over his mouth on that first night eyes, wide bodies, too close for the charity of context. Underneath in block letters cut from a printer step down. "Or next time Child Services sees this first." Adiese went very still. The color left her face, then returned in a rush that looked like anger refused. Daniel felt something hot and clean rise in him, a fury that had a father's shape. "They won't touch him," he said. "They don't need truth," she replied, voice steady. "Only stories that scare." Daniel opened the parcel. A small, cheap baby monitor camera lens, cracked pink plastic frilled with dirt. There was a note scrawled on the padding. "How safe is he while you play family?" No signature. The smell of old smoke clung to the tape. He turned the items over carefully, as if fingerprints might whisper names. "Victor A., rival, someone inside the building." His gaze snagged on the corner of the photo, an angle he recognized. The opposite tower, 20th floor. He made a mental note to pull security logs at dawn. Adiese's hands were steady now. "There will be more," she said. "Men who cannot move you will try to move your fear. Then we anchor it." Daniel replied the decision, settling in his bones, with light. He gathered the threats and slid them into a folder. He would call the lawyer in the morning, file a police report, speak to the building, install a camera of his own. But tonight belonged to the boy sleeping in the next room, to the lullaby that braided the air, to the fragile scaffolding of patterns they were raising beam by beam. At 2:12, a small sound came from Chidi's room, barefoot taps on wood. Daniel and Adiese were there before the second step. Chidi stood at the threshold, eyes open to a dream, only he could see. Daniel crouched, palms up. Adiese began the lullaby, barely a breath. Between voice and open hands, the boy's body softened. He swayed toward his father. Daniel lifted him gently, felt the warm weight fold into his chest. The three of them stood there, one asleep, one singing, one holding the world upright, while the city tossed beneath their window. When Daniel laid his son down, the blue crayon slipped from Chidi's fist and rolled to the pillow's edge. Daniel placed it back. Patterns. He walked to the doorway where Adiese's weighted eyes glimmering in the dim. He didn't thank her. The word felt too small and too loud for the hour. He only nodded once, the kind of nod that said, "I see you. I will not look away again." In the living room, the folder with threats sat like a dare. The future had sharpened its teeth. The present, though, was gentle and exacting. Checks at 4, at 6 pancakes, at 7 school at 8. Love was a schedule. He could keep it. Daniel set an alarm, and for the first time in a long time allowed his body to trust the night. Outside, the city kept its restless bargains. Inside, a father learned to make better ones. The morning after the anonymous threat arrived was different. Daniel woke before dawn, heart heavy with the weight of the photograph, and the menacing words tucked inside that brown parcel. He rose quietly, checked on Chidi, who was still sleeping, his hand curled around the ever-present blue crayon, and then padded into the kitchen, where Adiese was already preparing tea. She did not greet him with her usual quiet smile. Instead, her eyes searched his face as though she too had carried the burden of that letter through the night. "Did you sleep?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "Not much. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that photo." He clenched his fists. "Someone is watching us. Watching him. That cannot stand." Adiese set the steaming mug down. "You'll need strength. Drink." For a moment he hesitated, unaccustomed to being cared for, unaccustomed to leaning on anyone. Then he accepted the cup, letting the ginger warmth calm his chest. "I will protect him," he vowed quietly. "But it's not just about locking doors or calling lawyers. It's about choosing where my loyalty lies." Adiese tilted her head. "And where is that?" "With him," Daniel said, simply nodding toward Chidi's room. "With my son, always." Later that morning, his phone exploded with calls. Investors demanded explanations for his absence. At recent meetings, journalists circled around the whispers of scandal, and Victor, the ever-calculating board chair, sent curt reminders that patience had limits. Daniel ignored them all until after breakfast. He sat at the table with Chidi, who chattered happily about a school project involving paper dragons. Daniel helped him cut the paper wings, his large hands clumsy but determined. Each snip of the scissors felt like defiance against a world that wanted him chained to conference rooms instead of breakfast tables. When the driver arrived, Daniel walked Chidi down to the car himself. Reporters loitered outside again, their questions sharper, this time fueled by rumor. Cameras flashed. One shouted, "Is the maid your mistress?" Another, "Is child services investigating you?" Daniel stopped. His son looked up at him, frightened. Daniel crouched, placed both hands on the boy's shoulders, and said loudly enough for microphones to catch, "This is my son. He is safe. He is loved. And anyone who says otherwise is a liar." Then he opened the car door, kissed Chidi's forehead, and waved until the car turned the corner. When he returned upstairs, Adaze was waiting, worry etched across her face. "You should be careful. They twist words into knives." Daniel shook his head. "Let them twist. I won't let him grow up thinking silence is protection. He needs to hear me say it, out loud, with no shame." Adaze studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "That courage will cost you." "I know," Daniel replied, "but the cost of absence is higher." By noon, Victor stormed into the penthouse again, this time without board members, but with rage barely leashed. "Are you trying to destroy yourself?" Victor hissed. "Do you understand what you've done? Publicly challenging the press, refusing to cooperate with PR spin. You're painting yourself as reckless." Daniel met his glare with calm steel. "I'm painting myself as a father. If the board doesn't like that, they can find another puppet." Victor's laugh was sharp and cold. "A father? You think investors care about bedtime stories? You're one headline away from losing everything." "Then let me lose everything," Daniel snapped. "But I will not lose him." The two men stood toe-to-toe, the silence between them more dangerous than shouting. Finally, Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. "Do you think she cares about you?" He gestured toward Adaze, who stood at the edge of the room. "She's playing you, Daniel. You're blind because she's young and pretty and knows how to play the role of savior. But saviors can be thieves in disguise." Daniel's hand curled into a fist. "Enough." Victor smirked. "Mark my words, that girl will ruin you." Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls trembled. Adaze stood frozen, her face pale. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant." Daniel cut her off gently. "Don't apologize. You've done nothing but protect my son. If they can't see that, it says more about them than you." Tears glistened in her eyes, but she blinked them back, standing straighter. "I've been accused before," she murmured. "When my brother died, some people said it was my fault because I should have been watching him. That guilt never leaves. Maybe Victor is right. Maybe I bring trouble where I go." Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm. "No, you bring light where it's needed most. Don't let them steal that truth from you." For a moment their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them, trust, gratitude, a bond forged in fire. That evening, Daniel canceled yet another board call. Instead, he took Chidi to the park, a small, rare excursion guarded by bodyguards, who lingered at a discreet distance. Chidi ran across the grass, laughing, the blue crayon tucked in his pocket like a talisman. Daniel chased him, awkward but joyful, collapsing into the grass when the boy tackled him. For the first time in years, Daniel laughed, not the hollow laugh of boardroom politeness, but the deep, unrestrained laughter of a man rediscovering life. Adaze sat on a bench nearby, watching with a faint smile, her heart swelling with both relief and fear. She knew moments like this were fragile, easily shattered by the world's cruelty. As the sun dipped, Chidi tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Daddy, when I grow up, will you still be here?" Daniel's chest tightened. He hugged the boy tightly. "Yes, son, always." But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of the threat lingering, the photograph burning in his pocket, and the knowledge that enemies were circling like vultures. That night, Daniel and Adaze sat in the living room after Chidi had gone to bed. The folder containing the threats lay on the coffee table. Daniel opened it, spreading the contents out: the photo, the broken camera, the letter. "I won't hide this from you," he said. "They'll come harder. They'll use him. They'll use you. But I want you to know I will not bend." Adaze looked down at the photo of her hand over his mouth, captured in cruel suggestion. "This picture could ruin you," she said softly. "It makes me look like temptation, and you look like a fool." Daniel's jaw tightened. "No, it makes us both look like what we are, two people trying to protect a child." Adaze's voice shook. "Do you believe that will matter to them?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes burning with conviction. "It matters to me, and it will matter to him. That's enough." But even as they spoke, a storm was brewing outside their walls. By dawn, the photo would spread across social media like wildfire twisted into scandal. Headlines would scream of betrayal, gossip would whisper of secret affairs, and the empire Daniel had built would tremble at its core. And while the world sharpened its knives, a small boy slept in his room clutching a blue crayon, dreaming of dragons and fathers who finally kept their promises. The night was not silent. It was the calm before the storm. Morning didn't just arrive, it crashed. Daniel's phone lit up like a burning field notifications, mentions headlines, stacked with exclamation points and poison. The photo, the one of Adesa's hand over his mouth, had gone viral. Before sunrise cropped hard, captioned worse. Secret midnight embrace, billionaire and maid scandal. Underneath, sneering threads bloomed like mold speculation about hush money, the ethics of live and help, the inevitability of men like him. Daniel stood at the window jaw, locked the city glittering with 1,000 unblinking eyes. He had always known power played dirty. He had not realized it would come for him in slippers in his own living room while a child slept down the hall. Adiez hovered at the kitchen threshold, shoulders squared as if bracing for a wave. She had changed out of her uniform simple blouse jeans, yet the air treated her like a costume she could not remove. "It's worse than last night," she said, voice steady. "It is," Daniel replied. "But the truth hasn't changed." He held up a tablet. The screen showed the uncut elevator feed from that night, the seconds before and after the still photo. The context the rumor machine refused to show. In it, ADZ's hand came up, urgent, whispered words followed, and then both of them turned toward Chidi's room at the first soft step. "Context is quiet," she murmured. "Lies shout." Before he could answer, the intercom crackled. The doorman sounded frazzled. "Sir, child welfare officers are here." "And press. Many press." Daniel's spine straightened. "Let the officers up. Keep the cameras downstairs." He turned to Adieza. "Stand with me, we do not hide." She hesitated, the reflex of a life taught that survival prefers shadows, and then nodded. "Patterns," she whispered. He felt the words steady him like a hand at his back. 2 officers entered moments later, a woman in her 40s with watchful eyes. Officer Ife and a younger man scribbling notes. Behind them, Ngozi swept in unannounced headscarf, knotted like a crown, radiating the kind of authority that made even uniforms shift their weight. "We received a flood of anonymous tips," Officer F.A. began measured. She placed a folder on the table. The top page was the viral photo. Beneath it, screen caps of headlines and a blurry image of Chidi at the park smiling oblivious. "We're obligated to assess." Daniel nodded. "You have full access. You'll find locks installed, a gate on the stairs, alarms on exits, a pediatric appointment scheduled, and a sleep study booked for Thursday. You'll also find a boy who knows his father sat by his bed last night." Officer F.A.'s gaze did not flinch. "And the woman?" Adiz stepped forward before Daniel could answer. "I'm the one who kept him from the stairs. I'm the one who put my hand over his father's mouth so the boy wouldn't startle and fall." She lifted her chin. "If I must be punished for that, do it. But do not punish the child." Something softened in the officer's face, not pity, respect. "We don't punish for protection," she said. "We document, then we advise." Ngozi folded into a chair like a general resting between campaigns, snorted. "Advise quick. Breakfast is getting cold, and reporters are multiplying downstairs like goats." The inspection moved briskly. They checked the balcony locks. They tested the chimes Daniel had hung on the hall door, soft bells that would sing if opened at night. They examined the installation appointment email for new sensors. Officer F.A. knelt by the bed, her tone warm, when Chidi, just waking, blinked at her badge. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked gently. Chidi nodded solemnly. "My daddy is the library," he announced. "He holds stories." Ife smiled. "That is a good kind of safe." She stood, closing her notebook. "We'll file a report. For now, maintain routines, reduce stress. Keep your appointments. We'll follow up in a week." As the officers left, Ngozi Rose pinned Daniel with a look. "Do not blink," she said. "Vultures circle men who blink." Then she crossed to Adiez, and unexpected as Rain and Harmattan pulled the young woman into a brief, fierce embrace. "You have a place at my table," she said. "Not as scandal, as family." The door closed. For a breath, the penthouse exhaled. Daniel turned to Adiez. "They did not bruise us," he said, surprised by the lightness in his chest. "They will try again," she warned. "Men who cannot move you will try to move your fear." He nodded, already moving. "Then we move first." He called legal. He called building security. He called his private investigator, an old warhorse named Kunle, who preferred evidence to adjectives. Pull camera logs from the opposite tower, Daniel instructed. 20th floor, east line of sight into my living room. Cross-reference short-term rentals, shell companies, anyone linked to Victor or our competitors. I want names before dusk. Dusk is a poem, Kunle grumbled. I'll bring you a ledger. Meanwhile, Amma from PR called with a careful voice honed by years of catastrophe. We can sue, but it feeds the flame, she said. Better publish the full video. Pair it with a statement anchored in fatherhood, not defensiveness. Don't mention the maid by name unless she consents. She consents, Daniel said without looking at Adieze. She did not flinch. We tell the truth, a child was in danger. A woman acted with courage. A father learned the price of presence. Amma exhaled a sound like relief and resignation, married. It will not end the noise. It may tune it, Daniel replied. Release it. At noon, the full hallway clip went live. The shouting online didn't stop, but it changed key. New threads emerged, parents swapping sleepwalking stories, nurses explaining protocols, women snapping. Protect black domestic workers, don't demonize them. The viral tide didn't reverse, but it stopped chewing the shore. Kunle called it too. Got your ledger. The rental across the way is paid by a shell Dervish Media Holdings. Scratch it. The paper bleeds to Kestrel Strategies, which surprise pays retainers for your friend Victor's reputation management. Daniel felt a calm, colder than rage. He hired a long lens to make me look faithless in my own house. Kunle grunted. Men like him believe outcomes, excuse instruments. Shall I pull the thread publicly? Not yet, Daniel said. We leverage it. He texted Victor a single line. I know where the camera lived. We will not speak again without counsel. Read receipt. No reply. By late afternoon, the penthouse felt less like a fortress under siege and more like a workshop, problems on the table, tools in hand. Daniel replaced the fragile glass bowl near the hall with a basket of wooden blocks. Chidi immediately declared them dragon teeth. Ngozi returned with food and a fierce prayer muttered at the doorframe. Adize moved in quiet arcs, orbiting the boy's joy and the house's needs with the same attentive gravity. As the sky lowered violet, Daniel crouched beside Chidi on the rug. Family reading at 7, he announced. Lights at 8. Dragons, negotiable. Chidi grinned, patting his pocket to ensure the blue crayon was still there. Can Miss Ada read the dragon voice? Adize raised a hand, surrendering to fate. If the dragon has manners, she bargained. It burps smoke, Chidi said, but says excuse me. At 7 they read, at 8 they tucked. At 10 Daniel and Adize checked and found only the peace of a child who trusts the dark. At 11:40 a storm rolled in, rain lashing, glass thunder, shouldering its way between buildings. At 12:03 the power flickered, then died. The sudden silence was immense. The city fell away, replaced by the sound of rain chewing the balcony, and Daniel's heartbeat growing too loud. The sensor chime on the hall door electric went mute. The night swallowed a floor of safety. Adize's face appeared beside him in the dim. Flashlights, she whispered, already moving. They had staged them that afternoon, one by the kitchen, one by Chidi's door, one in the hall drawer. Patterns had prepared them for the dark. A soft sound came from down the corridor, the barefoot hush that had become a siren in Daniel's blood. He reached the bedroom in 2 strides. In the ghost light from storm-streaked windows, he saw Chidi standing, eyes open to a dream hand, seeking the door that no longer sang a warning. Captain Daniel breathed, voice low and warm. The dragon is sleeping. We walk soft. Adieze's hum lifted behind him, the lullaby, a line thrown across the dark. Chidi's posture softened. He turned, weight tipping toward the voice, toward his father's open hands. Daniel guided him back to bed, laid him down, smoothed his hair. The storm scored the windows. Inside, a smaller weather rewrote itself, fear, gusting, then passing, routine holding. A crack like a snapped bone split the night. Somewhere in the building, a transformer surrendered. The blackout deepened. Emergency lights failed to catch. For a breath, the penthouse was a cave. From the living room came a different sound, metal, skittering, then a thud. Daniel handed Adize the flashlight and moved fast, every nerve hot. The balcony door, a double lock he had checked, hung ajar by a finger. The wind had shoved it. The night beyond was a smear of rain and city breath. He lunged, slammed the latch, shoved the bolt home. Water clung cold to his forearms. He stared through his own reflection into the black. Behind him, Adize's light hovered like a small moon. We caught all of it, she said, not as reassurance but as fact. Because we were awake. He closed his eyes, let the truth wash him clean, vigilance. As love as labor, you do when no one claps. They rechecked the locks twice. They added a chair under the handle like families do everywhere when storms make foolish jokes of technology. They stood at the threshold of Chidi's room, listening to the boy breathe a lullaby, barely a thread. Now the house learning to keep its own time without electricity. The power limped back at 1:30. The chimes woke and sighed. Daniel set them to night mode, then turned to Adaize. "Resign if you want to," he said quietly. "Not because of shame, but because you deserve a life outside this siege. If you stay, I'll change your role. Not as help, as family staff guardian to my son, with pay and days and boundaries that honor what you are." She studied him light, cutting her features into courage and caution. "Men have made beautiful promises to me before," she said. Then the world pressed its knee to their backs, and those promises broke. "I'm not making a promise," he answered. "I'm building a pattern. Look at today." She did. Officer Fa's folder closed without condemnation. The video posted without erasure. Coonley's ledger tracking a wire that stained a boardroom white collar. The chair wedged under a handle, because love doubles its safeguards when the dark grows teeth. Adaize nodded once. "I'll stay," she said, "for him, for now, for what we are building." He didn't thank her. He only mirrored the nod, the ritual that had become their signature quiet exact. Near dawn, when storms grow tired of boasting, Daniel sat on the floor beside Chidi's bed, back against the wall, eyes on the boy's slow breath. Adaize leaned in the doorway, the blue crayon rescued to the nightstand, the house smelling faintly of rain and jollof, and something older, the mineral scent of a night that tried to take and failed. His phone buzzed once like a snake, remembering its nature. A message from Victor at last. "You can't win this." Daniel typed without looking down. "We already did. We chose him." He silenced the phone, set it face down, and watched his son sleep into the first light. The storm sagged. The city blinked awake. Inside the house kept a new time measured not by markets, but by the rhythm of a child's breath and the soft grammar of a lullaby. Patterns held. Day broke. The city woke restless. Newspapers sold at corners, screamed with headlines. Blogs churned fresh scandals by the hour. Victor's allies painted Daniel as unstable, compromised a father so entangled with a servant girl that he had lost his empire's pulse. Commentators debated whether Chidi should be removed for his own good. The world outside the penthouse was hungry for spectacle. Inside, the air trembled with a quieter tension. Daniel brewed coffee slowly, each stir deliberate. Adaize leaned against the counter, her face pale from another night of storms and chimes. Chidi still slept, his small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of innocence. "They won't stop, Adaize," said softly. "Even if the truth is loud, the lie is more entertaining." Daniel exhaled, jaw tight. "Then let them choke on their own entertainment. I will not let them break him." But the knock at the door was heavier than the day before, 3 sharp raps that carried authority. Daniel opened it to find Victor standing with 2 security men flanked by a lawyer, whose polished briefcase glinted like a blade. "Daniel," Victor said smoothly, "the board convened this morning. We voted. Effective immediately, you are suspended as CEO pending investigation." Daniel did not flinch. "Investigation into what, loving my son?" Victor's lips curved. "Into negligence. Into the impropriety of keeping a young maid in your home after hours. Into the disruption of shareholder confidence. Choose whichever phrasing makes you bleed slower." Adaize stiffened at the accusation, but Daniel raised a hand, silencing her. "This is my home," he said coldly. "You come here again with threats, and you'll face me in court, not in conversation." Victor's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. "Courts are slow. Rumor is fast. You'll see how fast." He tapped the folder in the lawyer's hand. "Child services will review. Investors will flee. By the time you crawl back, the throne will be occupied." Then he leaned closer, his whisper, a poison Daniel would never forget. "Empires don't fall from outside, Daniel. They rot from within. And rot always begins at the softest place." His eyes flicked to Adaize, deliberately cruelly. Then he turned and left. The door shut. Silence swallowed the room. Daniel's fist trembled. Adaize looked away, shame burning across her cheeks. "They're using me," she whispered, "to break you." Daniel's voice was steady steel wrapped in fire. "No, they're using fear, and I won't hand it to them." By afternoon, the viral photo resurfaced in new edits, cropped tighter, captioned with venom. "The maid who ruined a billionaire." Adaize sat on the sofa, scrolling despite herself, each comment cut like glass. She planned it. Of course she's young. Men like him never change. Daniel sat beside her, gently taking the phone from her hands. Don't let strangers who don't know your name decide who you are. Her voice broke. But they decide how the world sees me. He met her eyes. Then we show them something stronger than their lies. Not scandal, not shame, just truth repeated until it drowns them. At that moment, a small figure shuffled into the room. Chidi, still in pajamas, clutching his blue crayon. His sleepy eyes blinked up at them. Why are you sad? He asked. Adaye swallowed hard, forcing a smile. We're not sad, Chidi, just tired. Chidi tilted his head, then nap. That's what my teacher says. He climbed onto the couch between them, wedged himself firmly in the middle, and leaned against Daniel's chest. The child's presence dissolved the sharp edges of the morning. Daniel kissed his son's hair and whispered, You're right, we'll rest. Together. Evening came heavy with unease. Daniel tried to work at his laptop, but every notification was another headline, another whisper of betrayal. His legal team confirmed Child Services would send another officer tomorrow. The board had officially stripped his signature authority. Victor had already been named acting chair. But worse came at midnight. The storm had passed, leaving a humid stillness. Daniel and Ads took turns checking Chidi's room. At 1, 2, 4, 3, Daniel heard the sound, footsteps soft, deliberate. He rushed into the hallway and froze. Chidi was walking again, eyes wide but unseeing, heading straight for the balcony. Daniel's blood ran cold. Chidi, he whispered, moving slowly. Captain, let's walk soft. The dragon sleeps. But the boy's pace did not falter. His small hands reached for the sliding door latch. Adieze, Daniel's voice cracked like thunder. She appeared instantly, her lullaby rising like a rope of sound. Come sleep, child, the road is long. The words slowed Chidi, his steps faltering. Daniel lunged, scooping him into his arms, just as his fingers brushed the cold glass. The boy stirred faintly, whispering, I was looking for you. Daniel's chest tightened. He pressed his cheek against his son's hair. I'm here. Always. Ads closed the door, locking it tight. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. That was too close. Daniel carried Chidi back to bed, tucking the blanket firm around him. He sat there long after watching the rise and fall of his son's chest. His empire could burn, the board could plot, Victor could smear, but nothing mattered more than this fragile heartbeat. When he finally stepped into the hallway, Ads is waiting, eyes shining with unshed tears. If you hadn't been here, but I was, Daniel interrupted softly. He placed a hand over hers, firm, grounding. Because you taught me patterns, and because I will never leave him again. For a moment, the room held its breath. The city outside roared with rumors, but inside truth had stitched itself into something unbreakable. Daniel turned to the window, staring out at the skyline Victor believed he owned. His voice was quiet but resolute. Let them take the company. Let them take the headlines. They cannot take this, my son, my presence, this house that is finally a home. Adese's gaze lingered on him, full of something unspoken. Then she whispered the words that had once condemned her, but now redeemed them both. Children don't feel belief. They feel presence. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt unshakable. Not because of wealth, not because of power, but because in that moment, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Dawn found the city rinsed and raw. Clouds thinned to a pale gauze. Traffic gathered itself like a choir clearing throats. Inside the penthouse, Daniel sat at the dining table in a clean shirt and yesterday's resolve. The folder of threats lay to his left. To his right, a crayon blue drawing 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a lopsided sundae. In the middle, the tallest figure wore a triangle dress with wings. An angel. Chidi's label written in crooked letters. Kunle arrived at 8 with the solidity of a courthouse. He set 2 files down and spoke without ceremony. The camera across the way, leased by Dervish Media, owned by Kestrel Strategies, paid through a fund Victor controls. Building records confirmed 3 nights of access during blackout tests. I have timestamps, payment trails, and a security guard who'll testify he was tipped to look the other way. Daniel's jaw tightened. Criminal surveillance, child endangerment by provocation, corporate malice. Kunle nodded. I prefer charges with ugly names. They travel well. Before Daniel could answer, the elevator chimed. Ngozi swept in wearing a patterned wrapper, the color of pepper soup, and a face that took no prisoners. She kissed Chidi's head, then placed a palm on Daniel's shoulder. Bring the lion out, she said, voice like lit charcoal. The hyena has shown his teeth. At 9, Child Services returned. Officer F's report was short and clean, safeguards installed, routines, consistent pediatric appointments kept. We will close the case if the sleep study shows no medical red flags, she said. Then softer. Keep doing what you're doing. Love is a schedule. You have learned that. When Afe left, Adiez exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath all week. She was dressed not in uniform, but in an unadorned navy dress, hair pulled back. The choice looked like a statement, I am not your scandal. I am a person who stands upright. Daniel met her gaze and felt the words he'd said last night settle into steel. You don't work for me, he said quietly. You guard my son with me. Guardian, she repeated, testing the shape of it. With proper pay and boundaries, she added, because patterns mattered. A smile ghosted her mouth. And one Sunday every week where I am unavailable to anyone. Non-negotiable, he said, and meant it. By noon, the board called an emergency meeting. Victor demanded Daniel appear in person. Daniel declined. We meet at my home, he said. Where this began, there was grumbling legal caution warnings about optics. He replied with a shareholding clause. They all remembered too late the founder's right to designate venue during extraordinary events affecting family. At 2, the suits arrived, Victor, with his practice concern. 2 directors with eyes that counted headlines like coins. Counsel tight, lipped. A reporter tried to slip into the elevator behind them and was gently redirected by building security, who for once chose dignity over tip money. Ngozi poured tea as if hosting a wake. Kunle stood in a corner, an unblinking ledger disguised as a man. Victor opened with velvet. Daniel, this has gone far enough. For the sake of stability, for the sake of my son Daniel, cut in calmly, will proceed by facts. He nodded to Kunle. The investigator laid out the chain rental contracts, shell companies' transfer receipts, the guard's statement, the lens purchase order shipped to a co-working mailbox. Each page landed with a sound like a gavel. Counsel's pen stilled. One director's throat bobbed. Victor tried to laugh. You think anyone will believe I arranged a telephoto misunderstanding? Kunle slid one last photo onto the table, Victor exiting the opposite tower by a service door 2 hours after the viral shot was taken, head down, ball cap pulled low, time stamped. The room's temperature dropped. Daniel's voice did not rise. It deepened. You loosed a camera at my window. You aimed rumors at a child. You tried to separate a father from his son for control of a company we built together. He leaned in the calm of a man who finally knows the only crown he'll keep. I am calling the police after this meeting. I am also filing for an injunction and a civil suit. But first, this board will decide whether it wants a predator near its reputation. Victor scoffed, but his edges frayed. Careful, Daniel. Men with empires should not pick fights they can't finish. Ngozi's chair scraped softly as she stood. Boy, she said, using the word like a bell that called childhood shame out of hiding, you have already finished yourself. The only question is whether you walk out or get dragged. Silence. Then the older director, a woman who had built 3 hospitals and buried a husband, cleared her throat. Mr. Chair, given these allegations, you are suspended pending investigation. The board will appoint an interim. She turned to Daniel. And you, Mr. Okoro, do you seek reinstatement? The room waited. This was the moment the old version of Daniel would have lunged for a throne, burnished by victory, reclaimed in spectacle. Instead, he thought of a blue crayon, a lullaby, threading a storm, a child walking toward a balcony in his sleep and a hand reaching to stop him. No, he said simply. Victor made a strangled sound. The others blinked. I am stepping down as CEO. Effective immediately. Chaos bloomed. You can't. The market optics. Are you mad? Daniel raised a hand. Calm returned like a tide obeying the moon. I'll remain as founder and non-executive chair for 6 months to stabilize and assist the transition. My conditions: company-funded programs for worker protections, including domestic staff training and legal resources, an internal code against weaponizing private lives as strategy, and a foundation seeded personally by me and matched by the company focused on pediatric sleep health and caregiver support across the city. He looked at each face in turn. If you refuse, I sell and walk, and I take enough talent with me to make it hurt. Silence held, then cracked. The hospital builder director nodded once. Approved contingent on council's review. Another followed, then another. The votes fell like rain, deciding to be mercy. Victor stared a man watching a script catch fire. You think this makes you noble, he spat. No, Daniel said. It makes me present. Police arrived after the board filed out. Statements were taken. Kunle's ledger became evidence. Victor tried to leave via the service corridor and found 2 uniformed officers waiting with the patience of people paid by the hour. Cuffs did not close yet, but the cold frame of consequence slid over a man who had assumed exemption. When the door shut for the last time, quiet unfurled. Adaize stood near the window, palms flat on the sill, watching rain freckles evaporate from the glass. "You walked away," she said, not as accusation, but awe. "I walked toward," Daniel answered. He looked down the hall. Chidi's laughter pinged off. Tile Ngozi had bribed him into quiet with a promise of hide-and-seek after dinner. "There is a difference." Evening dropped soft. Daniel kept the new wall in his calendar. 6 to 9 belonged to Story and Stew. He burned the plantains and earned a delighted cackle from his son. Adaize salted the stew with the economy of a woman who never wastes flavor. At 7, Chidi presented a new drawing, 3 figures again, this time beneath a house with a crooked gate and a speech bubble over the tallest stickman. "I am here." The letters were steadier. They read on the couch dragons that burped smoke and said, "Excuse me." Daniel hammed the voices until the boys shrieked with laughter. Adaize contributed a dragon auntie who scolded everyone into good grammar. At 8, the blue crayon retired to its post on the nightstand. The lullaby braided the dark. Chidi drifted without walking. In the hush that followed, Daniel and Adaize sat at the table with mugs that steamed like small altars. "Tomorrow," he said, "we meet the sleep team. Next week, the foundation paperwork. And Sunday, you vanish to your own life. If I text, the phone will bounce my message back with a proverb." She smiled, genuine now. "It will say, a river does not drink its own water. Rest is not selfishness, it is survival." They fell quiet. The city exhaled beyond the glass. "Tell me about your brother," Daniel said gently, the question finally safe enough to ask. She stared at the steam, then answered. "He walked. We lived where stairs were cracked and light fickle. I was 12. I should have. I did not." She swallowed. "It taught me to hear sleep like a weather, to stay when others clock out, to put my hand over noise." She looked up. "I will not let the world turn that into shame again." "It won't," he said. "Not in this house." Near 9, Ngozi rose with a satisfied sigh. "I will go," she announced. "Old bones, strong will. Call if the dragon misbehaves." At the door, she paused, cupping Daniel's face in a palm that had comforted babies and slapped fools. "You did not choose small," she said. "You chose true." When the elevator swallowed her, the penthouse felt less like a stage and more like a home built on stubborn, ordinary goodness. Daniel walked the hall one last time, checked the latch, the chime, the gate. He paused at Chidi's doorway. The boy slept, boneless mouth open, one hand flung toward the nightstand where the blue crayon stood guard. Daniel whispered to the dark, to the ghost of a woman whose laugh used to set the table, singing. "We are all here," he said. "We found our way back." He turned. Adaize stood behind him, not intruding, simply present as she had been since the beginning. An angel without wings, a sentinel with a human heart. He nodded once. She nodded back. A ritual, a vow, a pattern. In the room with the city for a wall, the clocks all agreed on a new time. Not market open, not closing bell, but a steadier hour marked by breath and lullaby. And when the night asked its old question, "Are you here?" the house had only one answer. Yes. In a world that worships speed and spectacle, it's easy to forget that love is built in small, stubborn patterns, showing up, listening, tucking in, checking twice. Daniel learned that money can buy gates and alarms, but only presence teaches a child to rest. Adaize reminds us that courage often looks ordinary, a hand over noise, a voice soft enough to guide someone safely home. And Ngozi proves that family is not just blood. It is whoever stands in the doorway when the storm cuts the lights. If this story touched you, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. We read every single comment. Share one pattern of love you want to start tonight and subscribe so you don't miss the next African Stories journey. Your voice keeps this community alive. Your presence makes it home.